Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story of a king who took on a superpower, not with bombs or bullets, but with something far more powerful: oil. This is the incredible story of King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, a man whose actions completely redrew the map of global power.
And let's just start with this. These are the words from his very last public speech. Words that didn't just define his mission, but they might have actually sealed his fate.
Think about that. He didn't use an army, he didn't use a navy, nope. He wielded a totally different kind of weapon, one that just happened to flow right from beneath the desert sands.
And then just as he reached the absolute peak of his influence, his life was cut short in a shocking, and I mean deeply personal, act of betrayal.
So, what is the story here? How did a prince, who was once totally overshadowed by his extravagant brother, rise up to become a king who could literally bring the entire world to a standstill? Well, let's get into it.
Okay, so our story actually kicks off not with a king, but with a prince. Faisal was the second son of Saudi Arabia's founder, King Abdulaziz, and let me tell you, he was nothing like the guy who was supposed to inherit the throne.
You see, his own father, the king, saw it clear as day. He even once said he wished he had more sons like the disciplined, strategic Faisal. I mean, while his older brother Saud was all about that luxury lifestyle, Faisal was already out there making his mark as this principled diplomat, not afraid to stand all alone on the world stage to condemn the creation of Israel.
And wouldn't you know it, after the old king died, his worst fears basically came true. The elder son, Saud, took the throne, and his reign of just pure excess, well, it drove the kingdom right to the edge of disaster.
I mean, the contrast between these two could not have been more extreme. They were polar opposites. While King Saud was blowing through money on palaces and huge allowances for the royal family, Faisal could only stand by and watch as the entire kingdom's treasury was just drained dry.
The situation got so bad, I mean so bad, that the rest of the royal family and the country's religious leaders knew they had to do something. So they went to the one person they thought could fix it, Faisal. They basically begged him to step in and save the kingdom from complete ruin.
So Faisal agrees. But there's a catch, a big one. He was bound by an oath he made to his dying father to always stay loyal to his brother. So he wouldn't take the throne. Instead, he'd become prime minister and basically run the show from behind the scenes.
And man, he did not waste any time. His changes were immediate and sweeping. First, he cut off the royal family's ridiculous allowances. Then he took their fancy palaces and turned them into government buildings. And in a truly historic move, he abolished slavery, get this, paying for the freedom of thousands of people right out of his own pocket. He even started opening schools for girls, which was a super radical idea that made the conservatives furious.
Well, you can imagine how King Saud felt about all this. As Faisal got more and more popular, Saud just got more and more angry. Finally, he snapped. He ordered his personal royal guard to surround Faisal's palace and arrest him. This was it, the big confrontation.
But what happens next is straight out of a movie. It turns out the guards' loyalty wasn't with the king they served. It was with the leader they respected. So when Faisal calmly walked out to meet them, the soldiers, they just dropped their weapons and saluted him. At that moment, with the entire army behind him, Faisal knew his oath couldn't hold. In 1964, he became the new king.
Okay, so now he's king, and his mission, his vision, it gets way bigger. He didn't just want to be a leader for Saudi Arabia, he wanted to be a leader for the entire Muslim world. And that ambition, that was going to put him on a direct collision course with the United States. And this is where things really escalate. October 1973, the Yom Kippur War breaks out. Arab armies were actually making some serious gains against Israel. But then, the United States steps in, airlifting a massive, multi-billion-dollar military aid package that completely turns the tide of the war. For Faisal, this was the ultimate betrayal, and it led to a decision that would send shockwaves around the entire planet.
To understand just how powerful this move was, you have to look at this number. At the time, America got about 80% of its oil from Arab nations, and King Faisal had just turned off the tap.
The effect was immediate, and it was chaos. The American economy just ground to a halt. There were lines for gas that stretched for miles, cities went dark, 500,000 people lost their jobs, the stock market lost billions, the country that put a man on the moon was now canceling Christmas lights, all because of one man's decision.
Now, you'd think America would be ready to send in the troops, right? And they were secretly planning it, but Faisal's response, it was absolutely legendary. He was totally unfazed. He threatened to just burn the oil fields himself, reminding them that his people could go back to surviving on dates and milk, but the West could not survive without its oil.
Faced with total economic collapse and Faisal's iron will, America had no choice. They backed down. Faisal had won. He was a hero across the Arab and Muslim world, on top of the world, at the absolute peak of his power. And then, on March 25, 1975, it was all over.
So what happened? Well, during a public reception, Faisal's own nephew just calmly walked up to him, pulled out a pistol, and shot him twice, point blank. Now, the official story was that it was all about personal revenge, but the timing, the circumstances, they fueled all kinds of speculation ever since.
So, you've got two very different stories here. On one hand, the official motive, a decade-old family grudge over a brother who was killed protesting a TV station. Okay. But on the other hand, a lot of people point to something way more sinister. Geopolitical payback. I mean, the assassin had just come back to Saudi Arabia after living for 10 years in the United States, the very country his uncle had just brought to its knees.
We might never know the real reason for sure, but what we do know is what happened next. After Faisal was gone, that powerful, united front he had built just crumbled. And since then, no Saudi king has ever dared to challenge American foreign policies so directly again.
King Faisal's story is just this powerful reminder of how the conviction of a single leader can literally reshape the entire world. And it leaves us with a pretty big question for our own time. In today's interconnected world, could one person, one leader, ever have that kind of impact again? It really makes you think.